CEO challenges a black woman to fix an impossible airplane engine. And what happened next changed the lives of everyone in the room. The silence in the AeroDynamiX auditorium was deafening. 200 people, engineers, executives, and journalists, stared intently as James Carter, the company's CEO, paced around Lila Jackson like a predator circling its prey. His piercing gaze swept the room, daring anyone to question his authority. "So, Miss Jackson," he drawled the word with obvious contempt, "you really believe you can fix what my team from Harvard and MIT couldn't solve in 3 months?" Lila stood motionless in front of the T8000 Turbo-An engine, a $20 million, zero-cents piece of machinery that had been AeroDynamite's nightmare for the past few months. At 2 years old, she looked completely out of place there. Her calm demeanor only fueled the crowd's skepticism, their whispers growing sharper. No corporate uniform, no visible credentials, just a black woman who had shown up at the company an hour earlier asking to speak to Carter. "I said I can identify the problem," she replied calmly, ignoring the muffled laughter that echoed around the room. Carter smiled, with calculated cruelty. He leaned in, his voice a venomous whisper. "You're out of your depth, Ms. Jackson." He had orchestrated this situation perfectly. When he heard that some woman had called claiming she could solve the T8000 problem, he saw the perfect opportunity for a public spectacle. "Very well. 30 minutes, he announced theatrically. "If you fail, and we know you will, I want this recording to serve as an example to any other dreamers who think they can waste our time." Smartphones immediately went up. The VP of Engineering, Dr. Michael Reed, shook his head in disdain. "James, this is ridiculous. We shouldn't give her a platform." "Let her try," Carter interrupted, his eyes gleaming with malice. He smirked, already imagining the headlines of her failure. "It'll be educational for everyone to see the difference between real competence and, well, whatever that is." Lila studied the engine silently for a few seconds. Inside, a mixture of pain and determination boiled in her chest. The sting of betrayal from her past at Lockheed Martin surged, hardening her resolve. She had recognized that specific defect the moment she entered the room. More than that, she knew exactly who had caused the problem and why. "Interesting," she murmured, lightly touching a specific section of the combustion system. "Modified injection system. Very creative." Dr. Reed frowned. How had she identified that modification so quickly? It had taken his team weeks to discover it. His hands clenched, unsettled by her precision. Carter, however, was too busy savoring his anticipated victory to notice the technical accuracy of Lila's comment. 28 minutes, he announced. "I hope you have a backup plan for when this doesn't work." Lila didn't respond. Instead, something almost imperceptible changed in her posture. The hesitation disappeared, replaced by a confidence that made some of the more attentive observers frown. It was as if she had just made an important decision. She removed a small smartphone from her pocket and quickly typed a message. On the screen, only 3 words appeared. "It's time, Elijah." 500 miles away in Atlanta, Georgia, a man in a suit in a Department of Defense office smiled as he read the message. Elijah Moore, Lila's former colleague at Lockheed Martin, had waited 6 months for this moment. His pulse quickened as he prepared to unleash their carefully guarded evidence. "Finally," he muttered, opening a digital file marked Ultra Confidential Project Orion. Back in the auditorium, Lila put her phone away and looked directly at Carter. "Mr. Carter, before we begin, may I ask a question? How exactly did you obtain the original schematics for this engine?" The question hit Carter like a bolt of lightning. For a moment, his mask of arrogance faltered. His eyes darted nervously, betraying a flicker of panic. How did she know there were original schematics? That was classified information. "That's not relevant to the test," he stammered. But Lila had already turned back to the engine. And now she was working with precise, confident movements that made it seem like she knew every screw in that machine. Because in fact, she did. Dr. Reed whispered to his assistant, "How does she know exactly where to look? This doesn't make sense." He felt a cold sweat as her expertise became undeniable. What none of them knew was that Lila Jackson had spent the last 6 months meticulously planning this moment. And the T8000 engine wasn't just a broken machine. It was the key to the most devastating revenge the aerospace industry had ever seen. Every move she made was calculated, a step toward dismantling Carter's empire. If you're enjoying this story of justice and revenge, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what Lila is about to reveal will shake not only Carter, but the entire United States aerospace industry. 25 minutes remaining. Carter walked up to the cameras, adjusting his tie knot with a smug smile. Gentlemen of the press, I hope you're capturing every second of this educational demonstration. I want this recording sent to every university in the country as an example of what happens when you confuse dreams with competence. Lila continued working silently, her hands dancing over the components with a precision that made Dr. Reed squint. She had identified 3 critical problems in less than 10 minutes, flaws that his Harvard team had taken weeks to find. The room grew tense as her success threatened Carter's narrative. "How does she know that?" whispered Reed's assistant. "It's impossible for someone without technical training." "Beginner's luck," Reed replied, but his voice carried growing uncertainty. Meanwhile, at the Department of Defense, Elijah Moore was busy executing his part of the plan. With Level 5 security clearance, he opened the classified files on Project Orion, the military investigation into technology leaks that he and Lila had secretly begun 6 months earlier. He double-checked every document, ensuring no loophole could save Carter. "Colonel, I need to speak with you urgently," Elijah told his superior. "I have evidence of industrial espionage involving classified military technology at AeroDynamiX." Carter laughed louder and louder for the audience. "Look at her shaking hands. See how she hesitates? That's what happens when someone unqualified tries to play with real technology." But Lila's shaking hands were actually performing microscopic calibrations on the combustion system. She had identified not only the defects, but also the specific markings that proved the illegal origin of the technology. 6 months earlier, Lila had discovered the first clues of the theft when she noticed familiar specifications in an AeroDynamiX patent. They were fragments of her own research at Lockheed Martin, a project that had been canceled after an alleged security breach. The betrayal had shattered her trust, but it ignited a fire to reclaim her legacy. She had spent months investigating discreetly, building a network of contacts within the aerospace industry. Elijah, still active at Lockheed Martin and with military connections, became her key ally when they discovered that the technology theft was much bigger than they had imagined. "The whole system is rotten," Elijah had said during one of their secret meetings. "They steal military research, sell it to friendly corporations, and then use that technology in government contracts. It's a perfect cycle of corruption." Lila had smiled coldly. "Then let's break that cycle." Back in the present, Carter was so confident that he began making cruel jokes to the audience. "Maybe we should offer an instruction manual or perhaps a basic physics course." He waved dismissively, his laughter masking a growing unease as Lila's competence became apparent. The audience laughed, but some of the more observant engineers began to notice disturbing details. Lila wasn't consulting manuals or schematics. She knew that engine as if she had designed it herself. Dr. Reed felt a chill run down his spine when Lila removed a specific component with a movement he had seen only once before in the Lockheed Martin lab years ago, performed by Dr. Lila Jackson before she mysteriously disappeared from public life. "Impossible," he muttered. "She can't be." 20 minutes remaining. Carter's phone vibrated, a message from the Department of Defense. "Mr. Carter, this is an official notification. AeroDynamiX is under federal investigation for possible industrial espionage. Agents will be at your facility in 30 minutes. The color drained from Carter's face so quickly it looked like a magic trick. He gripped his phone, his knuckles white, as his empire began to crumble. He looked frantically at Lila, who had stopped working and was now watching him with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Problem, Mr. Carter?" she asked calmly. This is a trap," he stammered, his arrogance evaporating like steam. Lila resumed her work. "A trap would be if I were here under false pretenses. But I told you exactly who I am, someone who can identify the problem with your engine." She moved with surgical precision, each adjustment a silent rebuke to Carter's mockery. She paused, making direct eye contact. "What I didn't tell you was why I can identify it." Dr. Reed took a step forward, his voice shaking. "You're Lila Jackson." Dr. Lila Jackson, who disappeared from Lockheed Martin 6 months ago after the incident with Project Horizon. His realization sent a ripple of shock through the room. A deathly silence fell over the auditorium. The smartphones continued recording, but now they were capturing something very different from the spectacle of humiliation Carter had planned. Lila smiled for the first time since she had entered the room. "Bingo, Dr. Reed. And this engine you can't fix. It's based on my stolen research from Project Horizon, research that was illegally sold to AeroDynamiX after they forced me out of Lockheed Martin." Carter recoiled as if he had been struck. "That's impossible." "We purchased this technology legitimately from North Star Solutions, which purchased it from Skytech, which purchased it from Daniel Reed, cousin of Dr. Reed here." Lila calmly pointed to the chief engineer, who looked as if he were about to faint. Dirty money passing from hand to hand until it ended up here. The auditorium exploded in shocked whispers. Carter tried to regain control, but his voice came out as a squeak. "These are unproven accusations. You can't prove anything." Lila stopped working again and stared at the entire audience. Her demeanor had completely changed. She was no longer the humble woman who had entered the room. She was the brilliant aerospace engineer who had revolutionized propulsion before being betrayed and silenced. "Mr. Carter, during these 30 minutes, I didn't just repair your engine. I documented every component, every illegal modification, every mark that proves this technology was stolen. I triggered a hidden failsafe in the engine's core, broadcasting its illicit origins to federal servers. And all of this," she held up her smartphone, "was broadcast live to the FBI." The crowd gasped, their earlier jeers replaced by stunned awe. For a moment, when everyone laughed at her simple appearance and underestimated her ability, they thought they would witness just another black woman learning her place. But anyone watching closely would have noticed that it wasn't nervousness that made her hands move with such precision. It was the contained power of someone who had turned 6 months of silent humiliation into preparation for the most devastating revenge the aerospace industry had ever seen. 15 minutes remaining. Carter tried to regain control of the situation, but his voice came out desperate. These are baseless accusations. You can't just believe her without evidence." Lila stopped working and stared directly at Carter. "Evidence," she tapped her smartphone. "Elijah, start the broadcast." Instantly, the screens in the auditorium lit up with classified documents, emails, bank transfers, secret contracts, 6 months of meticulous investigation being exposed live. A $75 million 0 cents bank transfer from North Star Solutions to Daniel Reed, cousin of Dr. Michael Reed. Elijah's voice boomed through the speakers. Date December 10th, 2024, 3 days after Lila Jackson was forced to leave Lockheed Martin. Dr. Reed staggered as if he had been punched in the stomach. "No, not my cousin. I didn't know anything about this." "Of course not," Lila replied with cutting irony. "Just a coincidence that you were on the team that adapted my technology here at AeroDynamiX." On the screen, more evidence appeared. WhatsApp conversations between Daniel Reed and James Carter. Recorded audio clips, transfers to offshore accounts. A damning email from Carter, gloating, "We'll bury her work in her name. An empire of corruption built on the theft of Lila's research." Carter was visibly sweating now. "This broadcast, this is an invasion of privacy. You don't have permission to—" "Actually, we do," Lila smiled coldly. "Federal warrant issued 2 hours ago. The FBI is confiscating all AeroDynamiX files as we speak." As if summoned by her words, federal agents entered the auditorium. Dark suits, shiny badges, impassive expressions. The room froze, the weight of justice palpable. The audience instinctively moved away as they headed straight for Carter. "James Carter, you're under arrest for industrial espionage, money laundering, and conspiracy to defraud the federal government," announced Special Agent Thompson. Carter backed up until he hit the wall. "I'm the CEO of AeroDynamiX. You can't just—" "We can and we are," Thompson replied, producing handcuffs. "Your bank accounts have been frozen, your assets seized, and your company is under federal receivership." Dr. Reed tried to slip out the side door, but another agent intercepted him. "Dr. Michael Reed, we have some questions for you as well." "I didn't know," Reed shouted, his academic composure completely gone. "My cousin didn't tell me anything about where he got the technology." Lila stepped closer to him, her voice low but razor-sharp. "Michael, you attended 14 meetings over the last 6 months, where you specifically discussed how to adapt the Horizon design. I have recordings of all of them." Reed's face turned into a mask of pure terror. "How did you? You couldn't possibly have access to my own security systems that I implanted in the original technology." Lila smiled without humor. "Every engine based on my design has a hidden transponder. Every modification, every test, every conversation near the engines was recorded and automatically sent to secure servers." Carter, already handcuffed, looked at her with a mixture of hatred and despair. "You set us up! This was planned from the beginning!" "No, James, you set yourself up when you decided to humiliate me publicly." Lila gestured to the cameras still recording. "I just wanted to get my stolen technology back discreetly. But you gave me something better, an international audience, to show exactly what kind of man you are." The auditorium screens now showed a devastating compilation. Carter mocking female candidates in interviews, making racist jokes at executive meetings, firing qualified black employees, 6 months of documented behavior being exposed simultaneously. A clip showed Carter shredding Lila's project files, laughing as he did. "This is going live on CNN, BBC, and every major news channel in the world," Elijah announced over the loudspeakers. "The AeroDynamiX scandal is already trending worldwide." Carter attempted one last desperate act. "Lila, we can work this out. Any amount of money, any position in the company, anything you want." Lila finished the last adjustment on the T-8000 engine. The perfect roar of the machine filled the auditorium, a sound she hadn't heard in 6 months. Her revenge was complete, but her final words were the most devastating. "James, 6 months ago, you and men like you convinced me that I was worthless, that my research didn't matter, that I should quietly accept being erased." She stepped closer, her voice steady but searing. "Today, with this global exposure, you've lost more than your freedom. You've lost the only thing you truly valued, the respect of the industry you thought you ruled." As Carter and Reed were escorted out in total disgrace, their careers destroyed and reputations ruined forever, reporters bombarded Lila with questions. But she simply adjusted the tool in her hand and calmly made her way to the exit. Dr. Sofia Martinez, the only Hispanic executive at AeroDynamiX, approached with tears in her eyes. "Dr. Jackson, thank you. Thank you for proving that we weren't imagining things, that we weren't being dramatic when we talked about what was going on here." Lila nodded, understanding perfectly. "Sophia, you were never alone. And now, with Carter out of the way, maybe this company can finally become what it should have always been." He clasped Sophia's shoulder, a quiet vow to rebuild together. For a moment, looking at the wreckage of the empire of arrogance that Carter had built, a question hung in the air. Was it possible that 6 months of meticulous planning could not only bring down the guilty, but transform an entire industry that had silenced voices like hers for decades? 3 months later, the headline in the Wall Street Journal was impossible to ignore. "AeroDynamiX, under new management, breaks records for efficiency and innovation." The photo showed Dr. Lila Jackson, now the company's chief scientific officer, alongside Dr. Sofia Martinez, the new CEO, inaugurating the country's most advanced research laboratory. Carter, meanwhile, was serving an 8-year sentence for industrial espionage. His bank accounts remained frozen, his assets auctioned off to pay damages to the victims of his schemes. The man who once commanded a corporate empire now shared a cell with other white-collar criminals, his arrogance shattered by the brutal reality of federal prison. Dr. Reed had lost not only his job, but also his engineering license. No reputable company in the aerospace industry would hire him after the extent of his involvement in the scheme was revealed. He now worked as an insurance agent in a small town, his academic career reduced to ashes. "The irony," Elijah Moore commented during a CNN interview, "is that they tried to destroy the most brilliant woman in the aerospace industry and ended up handing her control of one of the largest companies in the sector." The transformation was visible in every hallway. The company that once had only 8% black employees now boasted 40%. women held half of the leadership positions. The scholarship program for students from underserved communities, created by Lila, had already benefited more than 200 young people. Dr. Jackson didn't just save our company, Sophia said during the quarterly press conference. She redefined what excellence in engineering means. Our designs are now 60% more efficient, our costs are down 40%, and our reputation has been completely restored. The T8000 engine, now renamed the Orion series in honor of the company's rebirth, became the industry standard. Orders poured in from around the world, and AeroDynamiX had become the fastest-growing aerospace company in America. Lila kept a simple routine. She arrived early at the lab, worked side by side with her diverse team of engineers, and always set aside an hour to mentor young scientists. Her desk still had no framed diplomas. She had learned that competence is demonstrated through results, not papers on the wall. The best revenge, she said during a lecture at MIT for engineering students, is not to destroy those who hurt you. It's to build something so extraordinary that they spend the rest of their lives knowing they tried to stop true greatness. The audience, composed mainly of women and minority students, erupted in applause. Many had tears in their eyes. They finally saw someone who understood their struggles and had proven that it was possible to overcome them. That same week, Daniel Reed, the ex-fiancé who had started the whole betrayal, tried to contact Lila through several intermediaries. He was facing lawsuits for fraud in multiple states and wanted to talk about the past. Lila responded through her lawyers with a single sentence: "The past is over. Focus on the future." Dr. Sofia Martinez, watching Lila work in the lab, often reflected on how Carter's attempt to humiliate a woman had turned into the salvation of the entire company. "Sometimes," she remarked to Elijah, "predators pick the wrong prey, and when that happens, the hunter becomes the hunted." Lila's story had inspired thousands of women and minorities in science and technology. Documentaries were made, books were written, and universities created scholarships in her name. But for her, the greatest victory was simple: to be able to work in peace, surrounded by people who valued talent over appearances. Carter, in his cell, had limited access to the news, but he occasionally heard about the successes of his old company. Each report was a dagger, twisting deeper as Lila's triumphs mocked his ruin. The irony was devastating. The woman he had tried to publicly humiliate now ran the empire he had lost. Every positive headline about AeroDynamiX was a painful reminder of how his arrogance had destroyed not only his career, but his entire identity. "Dignity," Lila had said during her last interview on national television, "is something no one can take away from you. They can steal your research, they can question your qualifications, they can try to publicly diminish you. But if you know who you are and what you're worth, eventually the truth always wins out." 6 months of silent humiliation had turned into decades of recognition and respect. The girl who once dreamed of flying among the stars had found something even better: the ability to help others achieve their own impossible dreams. If this story of perseverance and justice touched your heart, subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove that true talent always finds a way to shine, even when the whole world tries to extinguish its light.